Oh, really?
Bass?
What?
Bass?
Oh, the Beverly Hills Mayor.
So just get left in the dark.
Oh, that's great.
That's, she said that.
Oh,
even
that's
herself.
I have one too.
She does this wonderful thing with, well,
It's a sing-along, that's all it is.
it's wonderful.
All it
Okay,
is.
mic check.
A little loud.
Mic check.
Louder than life.
We are starting up on the third floor. Come join us.
That's why it's loud.
Say Poor People's Campaign.
The Poor People's Campaign.
There you go.
In Occupy, we used to go, everybody in Occupy, we would do something called mic check. When I say mic check, you go mic check. When I say mic check, you go mic check. You guys ready? Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
1%.
Check.
Great. That's okay.
All right, cool.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Barnes & Noble. I haven't been here since the pandemic, actually. It's so good to be out in public and see crowds, isn't it? So, Jay Ponti, his book, long time coming. Be the Revolution, How Occupy Wall Street and Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics. Many thanks to this gentleman here, Jay Ponti. I'm very proud to be here. I've known Jay for quite a while. Jay has always had larger-than-life campaigns, concerts, and projects.
Yeah.
And I always be going like, Jay, but really, like, think about it. Like, you know, you've got a month away, and you're doing this huge concert. He never gave up. And I've grown to so admire you and respect you, truthfully.
Wow.
I have to read this because it's so much to say about him, so excuse me for going on script here. But, so, Mr. Ponti is a grassroots political organizer, trainer, and consultant. He's participated in some of the most important social medias of the last decade, including Occupy Wall Street, Standing Rock, and Bernie Sanders' 2 presidential campaigns. He is the co-creator of the Bank Exit Fossil Fuel Divestment Campaign, and he's organized campaigns and direct actions around the country, one in which I have to speak about. The most hugest appreciation I had for this man was when he put together Jane Fonda and Friends, celebrating her 80th birthday, and she decided to occupy Vine Street. So we had Jane Fonda and Friends with Francis Fisher, Lily Tomlin, some other actors. We had indigenous elders from South Dakota, and we had probably about 400 people walking down Vine Street. And Jane had a huge bullhorn, and in front of Wells Fargo was announcing that she was taking her money out of the bank. It was raining. There was 0 budget. Unbeknownst to me, we had every media in town in the world covering, and I decided to do PR pro bono. So we're to do a press conference. We're outside the W Hotel, and I see Bubbles Cleaners, dry cleaners. I went, what a perfect place for a press conference. I walked in, I said, can we have 300 people in here for the next half hour? And he went, no. I said, what's for Jane Fonda? He went, okay. So we crowded everybody into Bubbles Dry Cleaner. We had the most amazing press conference. And then we marched down Wall Street. And sorry, it was close, it was Vine Street. So all the cops came. And I'm a child of the 60s, so when you see cops and you're protesting, you run, you don't stand. You know, back in the day, they were, called other names. And he said, don't worry about it, I handled it. I spoke with them, and they're gonna keep allowing us to do what we're gonna do. And literally, the police stood back. We literally crowded Vine Street, and Jane did her speech.
How many people?
We probably had 300, 400, 500 people. Then we went down the corner to, was it Chase? Chase Bank, which had a huge plaza, and we had a huge event there. And then what we did was a cross dance with with the elders and Jane Fonda, and everybody was literally in the middle of traffic. On the intersection, they did a round dance, which is a traditional Indian dance. I remember there was a drunk Santa in costume that joined us. There was Jane Fonda. I've never seen anything like this in my life. The police cars pulled over and allowed us to take over the street. I was stunned, and this was because of this gentleman here who said, I got it handled. I spoke with the police. And I grew to appreciate you so much. So proud of what you did.
Did you guys have a permit?
No, I just don't.
And if you
Introduce
appro-
yourself and tell us your name, please, ma'am.
I'm Donna Schumann. I'm a
Thank you.
publicist. I do pro bono for a lot of his rallies and things. So let me continue here. So this book reveals how Occupy organizers strategically activated their national network of activists to fuel the grassroots movement and help propel Senator Bernie's campaign. It literally did change the course of American history. More than anything, here's how J. Ponti can be summed up, and this is from Dr. Cornel West. Besides the other testimonials from Mark Ruffalo and many other people, J. Ponti is a legendary, long-distance, revolutionary thinker, an activist whose vision, analysis, and courage is a beacon of hope in our bleak times. Dr. Cornel West. So a big round of applause for this
Yeah.
gentleman here, J. Ponti. I would do anything and anything, any place, any event for this man.
Likewise, thank you, Don. I love you.
Yeah.
Drop mic.
Ladies and gentlemen, Donna Schumann.
Yeah.
And those of you who are in Hollywood may understand how valuable a publicist. Do publicists generally give their time away?
They charge
No.
for it.
Yeah, they charge a lot, and there's no way we could ever afford it. But it's actually really important. It's been a really important relationship because when you're doing a direct action, it's really a much more effective if you can get it beyond just the people who show up. You know, and Don has been such a huge part of that for a lot of the different actions we've gotten, getting People Magazine, CNN. So we're doing these we're doing these direct actions. We're doing these protests to challenge corrupt politicians or corrupt companies, bad banks, and we're trying to raise awareness about greater causes. And generally speaking, the media does not portray these things. So Don has been a huge support in a lot of the stories in this book. So my name is Jay Ponti. The book is called Be the Revolution, How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics. And I just want to say thank you all for coming today. It really means a lot. This is actually my first book reading, signing, and discussion. Stay tuned. I am so grateful that my friend Matt Cedillo's coming. He is a very important poet. Very highly acclaimed, world acclaimed poet, and he's gonna join us later for discussion. But to start off, I'm gonna read a little bit from the book. Would you guys want to hear something from the book?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, great. So yeah, the story Donna talked about was part of the bank exit movement. So you can read about that story. Would also just one other note about the book is it's actually, believe it or not, this is the first book to feature over 85 QR codes. So you'd think that people would have been doing this, but basically when you read one of the stories, like the one Donna just shared about Jane Fonda and my action at Wells Fargo, you can then click on the QR code and it will take you to a video where you can actually watch the action, which is pretty cool. So it kind of hits differently, it hits a little bit differently. And this book, I honestly did not want to write this book. I really didn't want to write this book. I never finished college. I have like one semester of college. And it was wildly outside of my comfort zone. It didn't really make any sense to me to do it, but there was just something inside of me that compelled me, really, really kept compelling me to write this thing. And I tried for a while to ignore that voice, but I've come to trust that still small voice inside of us. And I hope all of us can come to trust that voice and answer the call when it comes. And I'm really grateful. It is absolutely one of the hardest things I've ever done. But we are in the middle of the most dire time our species has ever faced. And I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but we now have, according to the IPCC report on climate change, the UN panel on climate change, the human species has less than 5 years to make, to basically transform our way of life. and get off of fossil fuels and start pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. Otherwise, there will be, at a certain point, there'll be little we can do to roll that back. And I'm sure humanity in some form will survive, but the way of we know civilization will be changing. And we have another challenge to deal with, which is the global issue of neo-fascism. So neo-fascism is a global movement that is based on that really arises out of income inequality. So, in my opinion, the generation coming up, it really does come down to the young people who are standing up today. And when I came up, I'm Gen X, we're the generation that was basically raised by wolves. And so we didn't have, we didn't have a lot of people to mentor us. So we had to sort of figure it out as we went along, and I have my friend Stephen Weinglass was always there in my corner, my best friend. His brother was Leonard Weinglass, the famed lawyer of the Chicago Seven, with Kunstler, one of the attorneys for the indigenous activists at Wounded Knee, Patty Hearst, Mumia Abu-Jamal, and of course the Chicago 8. Chicago 7 because Bobby Seale didn't have an attorney. But so I would hear a lot of the stories from Stephen's time at the 1968 convention. And so I got a lot from that, but generally speaking, we didn't have anyone to mentor us. We had to figure it out. And this generation does not have the luxury to figure it out on their own. And so I wrote this book to put forth a general theory of change that is modern. In the activist world, a lot of our ideas are still, have not evolved since the 1970s, and the world's changed a lot, whereas the neo-fascists have really gotten ahead of the curve utilizing the latest advances in technology to grow their movement, and it's become a global movement. And I wrote this to help the next generation, or anyone who's feeling, am I the only one, is anyone else feeling like this is a really important time and they wish that they could do more? Am I the only one? Does anyone else feel that way? Okay. And so I wanted to write this book also for young activists, for veteran activists, and also for people who are like, okay, I want to do something, but I don't know where to start. So I hope that it has something for you. I use storytelling, so it's sort of a firsthand gonzo adventure, sort of in the tradition of Hunter S. Thompson. That type of storytelling to take you through the events from Occupy Wall Street through two Bernie Sanders movements, and ultimately to the rebirth of the modern American labor movement. And so that is sort of the journey that the book is trying to take us on. And I think it's really important because the media has not covered this history. This is the history of our country that has gone, as Mark Ruffalo said when he gave his endorsement. He said, "This is the history of." I'll just read this. He said, Mark said, I'm going to skip over the accolades, but he said, "This accounting of the events of the last 10 years is a profound and seismic piece of American political and cultural history that has gone all but unnoticed in the mainstream. Be the Revolution is not about the battle of left or right, but the battle for humanity in the natural world. The timing of this book couldn't be more right, nor the message on point." Ken Burns should do a doc on this. But really it has gone all but unseen. We're gonna get to Q&A later. We'll have a section for Q&A. It's gone all but unnoticed in the American corporate media. And in my opinion, you can't really understand the world that we live in without understanding this story of struggle from the grassroots. So there are millions of people that have stood up all across the country. You just haven't heard about it. And I particularly used to be fascinated by the stories that Steve used to tell, because back in the 60s, people like Abby Hoffman, who Steve knew personally, they and Tom Hayden, they would get a lot of media coverage. Like, people would be aware of them. And sort of as the neoliberalism took control of what I call the corporate state,
which is the intersection of the media establishment, the political establishment, state power, the police state, and corporations basically working together to undermine grassroots movements for justice. Okay, and there's lots of instances in the book where I can show how those institutions work together to stop healthy populism, healthy citizens standing up. Occupy Wall Street for me was a really important moment in my life, and it was a huge part of my sort of awakening into what you might call class consciousness, to understand that there is a very small group of humans who control enormous wealth and power, and they work in a strategic way to prevent what we call the 99% from self-determinance and self-governance and having any kind of autonomy over our healthcare. They don't want to pay their fair share of taxes, and there is enough money. There is enough money and resources for all of us, but a very small group of people have been able to very successfully maintain control. Occupy Wall Street. And a lot of the youth don't even really know that it happened.
Huh.
It's astonishing. They don't even know what happened. That if I went to you and I said, "Hey, I got this idea." So Occupy Wall Street happened in 2011 in response to the 2008 financial crisis, which left millions of people homeless and upside down in their mortgage. It was a result of fraud. There's a movie called The Big Short by Adam McKay. I really highly recommend that movie if you want to understand kind of what happened. And then what happened is ordinary people, there was a big call to action, and ordinary people occupied their municipal buildings, first across the country, thousands of occupations, and then there were solidarity actions around the world. And I got to tell you, it actually did shake the establishment to its core. It was the first time in my life. And I mean, I was part of the Los Angeles occupation, if somebody went to you and said, "Hey, I got an idea, let's go to LA City Hall with 1,000 friends and let's camp out there for 3 months, what do you think?" You say, like, you're outside of your mind. And yet that happened. And it was such a profound, and there also, the media worked very hard to discredit that movement. You hear a lot of tropes like Occupy failed, they didn't know what they want, there's no demands. Not true at all. It was all part of a very deliberate smear campaign to undermine what was happening. But it was just a profound time for ideas to be discussed. But moreover, it was a time when people got out of the house and came together. Because one of the functions of late stage capitalism is something we call atomization, which means we become separate, different, alone. We stay in our house. We have the breakdown of unions and our institutions that would bring people together. Because when people come together, we have power. You understand? When we come together, we have power. And there's a reason why Amazon is the most profitable company in the world. It's because when we're disempowered, separate, different, alone, we look for stuff to fill the hole. And so we buy stuff. And that idea of consumerism is also a big part of the theory of change of this book. Because we have been so conditioned to identify ourselves as consumers, we've been conditioned from as long as we can remember to believe that some magical free market is going to give us everything we need. Okay, someone's going to come and save us. Some billionaire like Elon Musk is going to invent something, and what I hope to dispel that notion is that anyone is coming to save us, and that if you're looking for someone to save you, look in the mirror. We are the ones we have been waiting for. You are the one you have been waiting for, and that you have a lot more power than you think you do. You have a lot more power than you think you do. And there are stories of this in this book where one person or small groups of people have literally reshaped the world with no money, no resources. There's a story in this book about how I was part of a group that was an extension of our bank exit divestment campaign. I didn't lead this campaign, but it was called Divest LA. We pushed LA City Council to divest $8 billion from Wells Fargo and change the entire request for proposal process which discounted any banks that were investing in pipelines. Should have never happened. We passed public banking at the state and city level. Should have never happened. These are radical ideas, and yet we won. But most people have never heard of this, and most people would never think this was possible. So this book walks you through how those campaigns were launched, and hopefully it inspires you to believe that you can too, because you can. You can. So I'm going to read an excerpt before Matt joins us. And in this scene, the Occupy Wall Street and Wall Street Zuccotti Park, the police had already dismantled that camp. We knew it was coming. We knew that they were going to come. I'll actually just read the very before I get into this section. I'm going to read the opening because it was wild. Let me see. Okay, it's whatever. I'll just get through here. So this is from a subchapter called "The Night of the Locust." This is when 1,500 riot police showed up to ultimately dismantle the camp and end the LA version of the occupation. Night of the Locust. After the Zuccotti Park camp was cleared on November 15th, protesters in New York turned to the direct occupation of financial crime sites, banks, corporate headquarters, board meetings, foreclosed homes, and college and university campuses. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles occupation remained in the sprawling green around City Hall. During the last week in November, the LAPD had made 2 appearances to warn us to leave. On the first night, thousands had shown up in solidarity, following a mayoral announcement that the police should forcibly take down the camp, as was happening at Occupy protests across the country. On Sunday, November 26th, a 10-block perimeter was created around City Hall to cut off the possibility of thousands more supporters entering the area. I had been away from the camp when they set it up, but was able to find a weak spot and make it through. The mood was tense for several hours as 1,400 black uniformed shock troops stood shoulder to shoulder under the ominous incandescence of the streetlights overhead. To help people manage their anxiety, I organized a large meditation circle of about 50 people on the south steps of City Hall. I distributed some candles I had left over from a peace concert, the 11-11-11 peace concert, and led an earth peace meditation that I had learned at the feet of Himalayan masters I'd studied with since 2008. We set the following intention that the night would end in peace. 2 hours later, around 3 a.m., a voice came over the megaphone. The police were withdrawing from the area. Though we knew this was only a temporary victory, it felt like a victory nonetheless. Those of us who had participated in the meditation felt a special peace amidst the chaotic scene. It was a beautiful moment, and we allowed ourselves to wonder if our collective intention perhaps had some influence over the outcome, even though I have no peer-reviewed science to suggest that that is true. So just to be clear, no peer-reviewed science to suggest that's true. But it's a nice thought. 2 days later, the scene would not end so peacefully. On Monday morning, November 28th at 12:01 a.m., Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa gave an ultimatum to the occupiers to disperse. It is time to close the park and repair the grounds so that we can restore public access to the park, he declared. Meanwhile, what had happened is mayors across the country were having conference calls with the sheriffs across the country. Also, guess who else was at the party? Consultants for the banks. That's weird. And so this was the culmination of their coordinated effort to dismantle our occupation. Were we not the public? Did we deny anyone access to the park? No. We knew this was part of a coordinated statewide effort because the mayor of Oakland had told the BBC that mayors from 18 cities had recently participated in a call organized by the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It was a strategy call about how to dismantle the occupied encampments in their respective cities. This time, instead of approaching the camp directly and setting up a perimeter, 1,400 police burst through the double doors of the south lawn of the city in full riot gear. There were so many it looked like an army division, and it sent us instinctively scattering. They quickly formed ranks, a spectacle of force meant to intimidate us. It actually looked like, if you ever seen The Mummy, it looked like thousands of wasps pouring out, or locusts, pouring out of the back of the doors of the City Hall. Steve Weinglass and I were standing there on the steps when they burst through the doors. It was wild. This time, okay, in full riot gear. They quickly formed ranks, a spectacle of force meant to intimidate us. There was a tense standoff as some groups refused to be pushed off the grounds by approaching flanks. Some occupiers shouted and taunted the police. A few, possibly instigators, clearly wanted to incite violence. Unfortunately, the police were more than eager to oblige. Together with my best friend and fellow activist, Stephen Weinglass, there we are, I attempted to reduce tensions by using de-escalation techniques. Stephen was more practiced at handling such situations than I was. His brother was the renowned civil rights attorney Leonard Weinglass, so we covered that. Stephen and I were attempting to de-escalate confrontations between occupiers and law enforcement when I was knocked down by a sudden sharp pain in my back. A member of the LAPD had thrust the butt end of his baton into the back of my ribs. Everything changed for me in that moment. I understood for the first time in every fiber of my being that the class war was real. This was a pivotal moment in my life in politics. What I had previously known only in theory, I now understood in my gut. The state and its police force are not neutral referees in a society of contending interests. They are on the side of the rich and powerful. It was the final event in my transition from liberal to radical. Incidentally, the word radical is derived from the Latin word radix, meaning root, and implies the root giving life to the extremities. Think radish equals root vegetable. So in truth, being radical just means getting to the root of the issues. I think we need to reclaim and destigmatize this word that has become a term of abuse to delegitimize activists challenging the status quo. I think we'll stop there. So that's a little bit from Be the Revolution. And I now would love to introduce my friend Matt Cedillo, Greg Palast, who's maybe one of the last great investigative journalists. There's stories of Greg in the book, but he called Matt the most important political poet in America. He's also been called the revolutionary poet of struggle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Matt Cedillo.
Yeah.
Everybody, welcome Matt.
Yeah.
How's it going? All right, let's make sure that we can see Matt. Okay. All right, so Matt has driven down from Tehachapi.
Yeah.
Made the intrepid journey to be with us today, and Matt is the author of, and I really recommend getting his poetry books, City on the Second Floor and Mowing Leaves of Grass. It is, they're visceral, they're powerful, but you also learn some stuff. So welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you, Jay. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I got here late. I was driving actually literally from Tehachapi, where I teach at the prison. And so I was.
Where is that?
In the city of Tehachapi. So it's like.
Where's Tehachapi?
Tehachapi is off 14, and off a street
It's
called
far.
Backpack. It's far.
2 hours.
I have no idea where. It's in the middle of a bunch of mountains. I have no idea. It's about the same distance as Bakersfield. So.
Yeah. So just to start off, Matt, I'd love to hear a little bit about your process as a poet. Like, how has your life informed your creative process?
Well, thank you again, Jay, for having me. I guess the way my writing informs, my life, the way my life informs my writing. So I try to pick apart aspects of my life that have been experienced by millions of people, as opposed to just odd, idiosyncratic moments of my life. So if I'm going to write about something, I'll write about like a police encounter, or I'll write about having experience in high school, the racist principle. I'll write about things they're not just necessarily my experience, but actually the experience of millions. And I'll try to ingrain that against a large sweep of history. And so that to give like reasons and context. So it'll usually start with a kind of a condition of wonder and happiness, and then will come the abuse, and then will come all of a sudden a wave of history to explain how and why this happened. So it's not the experience of one person, but rather the experience of millions.
How about give us a little taste of one of your poems, like The Rich?
All right. Well, The Rich is a little different. So I'll do The Rich. And so this actually poem is The Rich. What was a poem that I wrote, and I really do want to talk about you and your books. I got a chance to read some of it, so I really do want to. This is your event. I don't have any books to sell, so
It's our event, brother. This is it.
Okay. I don't have any books to sell, so I mean, you do. So we're gonna try and throw a softball here. But I will do the poem to Rich. This poem actually I wrote. I was originally gonna write it with Greg, but he dropped the ball, and so he was busy exposing. Voters' pressure or something, some great pals.
Yeah,
kind of
whatever.
And, I didn't have time to write the other half of this poem, but I'll do the poem real quick. Okay. It's called The Rich. So this is a satirical poem. Don't protest me. I've actually had people protest in the room. We're gonna rise up against you. It's like, yes, brother, I'm a billionaire, and I've come to this open mic in Pico Rivera in front of 6 people to brag in all your faces. So it's a satirical poem. I'm not actually rich. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not the character I'm playing, but I oftentimes find the best way to really write these poems about the abuses of the ultra wealthy is actually to embody them and to pretend you're them and to actually talk as them, as opposed to just like listing all the crimes and abuses. It's more entertaining anyways. There was like billionaires against Bush back in the day. I think maybe that probably inspired a little bit of it. Anyway, here we go. I actually met them one time. I was in New York. It's pretty cool. There you go. The rich! Well, they're not like you and me. They see an opportunity and they grab it. Reach for the stars and they put them in their pocket. Company stays in the red, but they're backed by the government. Snort public dimes the lines of pure profit. Research and development, the rich, wow, they didn't even breed. Champagne wishes and caviar dreams, thoroughbred stallions, quarter-billion mansions, Seedwater horizon, blood diamonds, golden parachutes, silicon messiahs, feasting on endangered species, servants through platters, winter palaces carved from the tips of icebergs, 6-figure charters, vulture capital, $1 million cufflinks, fucking life like an apple, insured by suicide nets, lifestyles of the criminally negligent, but you haven't lived. So you've launched a car into space for no real reason. And that's what I call freedom. The rich, well, here's how it is. Dollars and cents, trademark and rent, facts and figures, lines on a ledger, derivatives and debt, build a future, increase productivity, union busting back to the 100-hour work between the factors and monopolies with their money, chores, and bets. Now, my friend, so the rich stay rich while the rest make poor decisions, pure ecstasy, living in the lap of luxury, pushing pharmaceuticals to mark up the market will bear your body to its altar at a life or death bargain, the gospel of wealth, because it is what it is, and that's all it's ever been. The less we spend, the more we keep. You see, the rich and the poor, well, they're just like you and me. 2 hands, 2 feet. The sky, the sea, and one heart that beats, and the time to make the most of it, so no sympathy. Reaching into these deep pockets, all we ever ask is for our fair share. That's all of it. So we out on the streets, scream for peace and justice. We sleep in satin sheets, drink free and guiltless over oceans and tariffs, liquidating pensions off the bid on porcelain portraits at billion-dollar auctions. You know you need us. You know we're selling your secrets. You know some sense DNA kids watching the puppets on television debate freedom, free speech, fascism. Democracy will reach the earth and punch the ozone and fuel the economy with space stations. Yes, space stations hydrating the red planet. We're gonna survive this lava pits. You got pots and pans. We got deeds and plans. Chopping down rainforest, colonizing the moon. We're the rich. Who the are you? We'll privatize the water supply and then copyright the tears falling from your eyes. Burn it all down. What the hell are you talking about? The ice caps already melting. You want to start something? You want to eat the rich? We're already killing your kids. 1 carbon footprint, 1 gas house emission, 1 oil rig, 1 naval ship, 1 free trade agreement at a time. We'll get away with it too. Nothing we say or do is ever held against us. Haven't you been paying attention? We're rich.
Woo! Come on! Put your hands together. Wow.
You got me reading the rich of the
Woo!
in the cookbook section. Right in front of the kids section. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
amazing.
funny. All right.
Listen, children. Today we're talking about class war.
So yeah, that's the rich. But yeah, so your book. I wanted to talk to you because I actually got a chance to read a few like probably the first 4 or 5 chapters, and you sent to me like 2 days ago, so I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing. I'm sure it's all equally amazing. But I want to talk to you a little about the experience there at Occupy. That was really, really fascinating to me because some of the things that I remember my experience at Occupy. I mean, I was never there. I never had a tent, but I mean, I knew so many of the key figures and people you were mentioning, and one of the things that always like struck me, you know, it always does still to this day strikes me about the intellectual left is like how adverse people are oftentimes to the power of a good slogan, the power of a good phrase. And yet, you know, you kind of embrace that, like, you know, that one of the big things came out of Occupy is "We Are the 99," and how much that really shaped people. So how do you really feel like some of the ideas of Occupy really kind of set the groundwork for so much of the you know, really awakening, a class awakening for so many people with some of these like really simple but really just these simple phrases that really cuts the heart of the matter.
Yeah, very, very important. And I think knowing the context is really important. So if people who are older, you know, Gen X boomers, this will be more visceral for us. But before Occupy, there was no conversation about, you know, the ruling class or, you know, the 99% didn't exist. There wasn't it was not socially acceptable to talk about those things. It would be dismissed as, they would say class war, but in a very negative way. Like you would easily get shouted down. And so just the idea had not really broken through that a very small group of people controlled fucking everything. Okay, and they would use that power to control the tax brackets, control the policies, you know, making money off of the backs of Black and brown people in the corporate the corporate prison system, you know, destroying the environment with fossil fuels, like on and on and on and on and on. That idea was not popularized, but having it a lot of times, I believe, like whatever you would call the left, which by the way is very diverse. Okay, so you know the right wing a lot of times tries to conflate, you know, the liberals with the left, and if you really understand, like liberals and leftists don't tend to really agree on a lot. So it's even within the narrow spectrum of the left, there's a lot of disagreement about philosophy, and there's constant infighting around those ideas. But Occupy, We Are the 99% was a simple, visceral way to help people create a new mental model. In the same way that also happened in Standing Rock with Water is Life. Such a simple, visceral idea. And it actually changed the consciousness of America. Changed the popular mythos forever. And it was an awakening for so many people that myself included, you know, because it never really clicked in that way. In a way that for a lot of frontline communities, it's much more, you know, they're living it every day. But yeah, so it's a great question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, you know, you mentioned Water is Life, you know, also the Sanders campaign, Feel the Burn. There seems to be some kind of magic in a 3-word.
Look at, and this is something that you know, Orange Mussolini pretty gets on a visceral level. He understands, you know, like we tend to communicate in language that's very cerebral, very conceptual, and you know, Donald Trump is a fucking liar, but he will bring it down to such a simple idea that has imagery. You know, like it's gonna be a big wall, a big beautiful wall, and it's gonna have a little door, you know, and make America. He will reduce these ideas to very simple language. That's like a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. And studies have shown it's incredibly effective. It's an incredibly effective way to capture the minds and get to and there haven't been that many moments that the left has been able to do that, but I think We Are the 99%, Water is Life, Feel the Burn, those were instances where it really captured kind of a zeitgeist.
Right, again, but if you look at that, like build the wall, that's 3 words.
Yeah.
Mexico will pay, that's 3 words. Lock her up, that's 3 words. I mean, again, those are all 3-word sentences. So I mean, I think that there's a real question of like cognition that goes on with this, and I think that in many ways we're very foolish to fight against that. I think that in many ways your book does actually celebrate the idea of that. I mean, that this is something that we should engage in. You know, I mean, even forwards, war is a racket. I mean, think about that was, you know, said in the 1930s, and people still to this day quote this concept of war is a racket. So I mean, I think this the sloganeering and agitprop, that's very, very important. I think that the agitprop of Occupy in that moment, I think really deserves to be celebrated and held up and remembered and echoed.
Yeah, and also I think one of the things that Occupy did, and the book isn't, it's just, Occupy is just the first chapter. It's an entry point. But one of the things I think that was amazing about Occupy is it showed people that they could stand up to state power. And also We Are the 99% inherently creates this mental image that there's a lot more of us. There's just so many more of us. But in the, definitely, movements like BLM don't arise out of Occupy. But we'd like to think that, I think it's an argument can be made that it did help sort of create some conditions that might have supported other uprisings, other movements for justice. I think there are other lessons to unpack out of that. But yeah, I think Occupy was, and it was such a vibrant place to discuss ideas. So that is really important. People came together to discuss these ideas. Now, there's a lot of criticism that I want to say criticism, but there's, I think, lessons to be learned from what worked and what didn't work. Not all of those lessons were learned, but yeah, super important.
Yeah, no, I want to start with positive. And again, like you talk about, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, that's 3 words, Black Lives Matter. And also, like no one is illegal. I mean, you think about all these phrases. These are things that people, it speaks to them immediately, and it gives them, people some chance, and it packs in a lot of ideas. And I think that the celebration of that is very important in your book, and the fact that you do actually embrace it, as opposed to people have this tendency because Trump does something to not do it because even just to reject the methodology, but instead it's we should actually engage in polemics, and have our own set of polemics. But the problem isn't phrasing. The problem is phrasing in general. The problem is what the phrases represent, and to combat that with our own phrase, our own popular phrases, and sloganeering. That you celebrate, and I think that was somewhat unique in the book, because oftentimes I read things that people are really opposed to that. So
thanks, man. Appreciate that, and especially coming from him. And I noticed in your poetry, I'm curious about your process.
Yeah.
What is your intention going? Because this talk is about words of resistance, the power of words, the written and spoken word to change ideas and get people connected to their power and inspire them to challenge the status quo. But I noticed there are phrases that really pop out. And in your process, do you start with an idea? What's the intention you go into your pieces with? Or is it really just kind of just sort of an outpouring of emotion and feelings? Talk about your process and your intention.
I'm gonna give you the least romantic, least artistic, least whatever answer. I start off with a thought process, with a brainstorming process. A topic says poem. On the bottom it says poem. In the middle here it says topic, details, point. Come with my topic. What are my details? What do I need to get in there? What is my point? Then I have an act 1, act 2, act 3. So what has to be the beginning, the middle, and the end. Then after that I draw 4 squares: 1, 2A, 2B, and 3. And so 1 has to connect to 3. So I have to introduce the world. I have to give it a problem. The problem is overwhelming the character. So this is the low point. At the end, we win. So why do we win? We win for reasons that were illustrated in the very beginning. And so this is actually how I do everything. It's so methodical. I work very, very hard to make it look effortless, and make it look easy. But it really is extremely. There's a whole long process that goes into everything I do to make it look effortless.
Yeah, I think it really comes through, and it connects. It's sort of that kind of Joseph Campbell monomyth and the classic intent. Sort of what do you call it? I want to say, was it Plato or Aristotle? Socratic. The poetics. You have intention, you have obstacle, and for some reason, the way that we tell stories in movies and books, to be able to distill that down into a 1 to 2 page poem is pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, it's difficult, so that's why you have to go through these different parts of the process. Then beyond that, I have a word arc in which a word will appear several times, and each time it appears, we've shifted points where we're at in the piece, and we've also shifted meaning. So like the word "the rich" appears several times in the poem "The Rich," and each time the word it appears, the narrator has shifted. So this doesn't follow the hero arc so much. The rich follows kind of a villain arc, and the villain is like in the beginning, I'm not a villain. I'm hiding the fact that I'm a villain. In the middle, now I'm welcoming you in. Now we're partners. We're co-conspirators in this. And by the end, the villain reveals himself to be like, oh no, this whole time, I'm a wolf. I'm going to eat you. So that's how that poem works. So
But going in your intention, for what purpose? Like when you're going into a poem, I know you're not a one, you have a lot of different subjects in your poems, but for that, to use that as an example, what is your intention going in? Like for what purpose? With what you're hoping the reader will experience, or how they will receive it, or how it will hit them.
Well, what I do is I have this concept of like what I'm going to write about and how I'm going to write about it. So, and I try to give those things equal footing. So what am I going to write about? I'm going to write about the rich. I'm going to write about robber barons. I'm going to write about people, the fact that we live in this world where people have these $250 million homes on the sea, and other people are eating out of trash cans, right? And so that's the world I'm going to write about. I have this world where they can colonize the moon, and there are oceans on fire, and there are plastics. There's islands of plastic, right? So that's what I'm going to write about. Okay. So now I know that, now I got to structure it. So in the very beginning, it's like, okay, it's so fun to be rich. In the middle, okay, here's how capitalism actually works. In the end, oh man, the rich are actually a bunch of sociopaths who are going to go colonize the moon and leave us on a burning planet. So that is actually how the rich is structured. So every piece of detail information I do in the research has to fit into one of those three things. And so I knew I wanted to cover Elon Musk. I knew I wanted to cover Bezos. I knew I wanted to get jobs in there somewhere. So where's the reference to jobs? Plucking life like an apple, insured by suicide nets, right? So this is a reference to all the Foxconn workers who are killing themselves working at Apple. The reference to Musk obviously is like launching a car into space. But then there's also references to Carnegie with the Gospel of Wealth. There's also references to Bechtel. Privatizing the water supply in Bolivia. So we'll privatize the water supply and then copyright the tears falling from your eyes. So there's all these like references to all these horrific things, abuses of capital within the poem. But I knew that the end had to end with them attempting to colonize the moon. And so the information that would best accompany that went at the end, and accompany the information of the lifestyle of rich and famous went in the beginning. So that's where you have stuff about launching a car to the moon.
So who were some of your creative influences, either creatively or in terms of what shaped your ethos, and was your lived experience, more of an influence, or were there other poets or writers that really had an impact on your craft?
Well, people think I'm lying, but my two biggest influences are Hugo Chavez and Diego Rivera. So I mean that's actually true. If you look at the poems, I mean it's a collage of information, and I follow the speech patterns of a speech.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Okay, so when I was 14, I went to Mexico City and I saw the history of Mexico. So I saw, you see it. There's Zapata, there's Benito Juarez, there's Cuauhtemoc. They're all like standing in line, and over here you see Porfirio Diaz, you see Cortez. These are the bad guys, right? So you see these people here. They cross this time and century, but they're united by a concept. Over here, same thing. So that taught me how to play with time, how to play with like imagery, how to just basically put everything in this giant collage, right? So it's kind of like films like Eisenstein or something. And so like that was my first initial thing. And so seeing the murals of Diego Rivera, and also growing up in East LA, I would see murals all over the place of like, you see Cesar Chavez next to Zapata, and these people are not united by time. I mean, they didn't know each other, but they're united by a theme, by a concept, right? So you see heroes marching across history. So that played a really big formation in just my artistic whatever general. If you look at the poems, the way the poems are structured, they move up and down like this, like a speech, right? So here's the part where we're laughing at our opponents, like, ha ha, what a bunch of idiots. Here's the part where we're really sad. Here's the low point where like, oh my God, think about the children dying in the street. And here's the part where we're gonna win and we're gonna triumph and I'm gonna go to the gates of hell to set us free. And so that's how we're gonna end. And so knowing that and following the patterns of political speech is how I structure my poetry.
Awesome. And honestly, that's that is what I hope that people will come away from Be the Revolution with, was like this feeling that even though the obstacles are so great, I have power, you have power, and that one or small group of people can actually literally change the world. And I don't mean that as a euphemism, I don't mean that as rhetoric, literally change the world because it has happened. And we can look to those examples.
So I'm very curious though. So you were in the introduction of your speech. Introduction to your book, you're talking about being able to change these banking policies at Wells Fargo, right? How many people would you say were involved in those actions and in that organization, in organizing those actions?
So yeah, so there's a whole chapter sort of that tells the story, and it's the most didactic chapter. Like it's actually a how-to, how they organized this campaign. So it started, I launched a campaign with Susan Sarandon and some other amazing people, amazing activists in support of the Standing Rock movement to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. It was asking people to take their money out of the banks, funding the pipeline and funding corporate prisons, but mostly the pipeline. And what happened was something I never ever would have thought would be possible. So basically we did, Susan Sarandon went on TV, and this is when she famously, actually, we're surrounded by children, so I'm not, you can Google what she said about voting when they asked her about Jill Stein. You can Google that. We're surrounded by children's books, so I'm not gonna say that, but we were able to reach about 40 million people in 4 days. But what happened after that was much more fascinating. People got the idea to push their city councils and in the institutions to divest billions of dollars, and that was insane. So a group in Seattle called Mazaskatoks was really the first through the door with getting their city council to divest, and then that inspired a group of LA activists, and these were millennials with I think there was about 8 to begin with. The core was three people or so. Trinity Tran, Ben Hauk, and Phoenix Goodman were sort of the core, the nucleus of it. And then, but at any given time, probably 8, and then they expanded the circle. As they kept expanding, they would bring more, up to 30 people to go in and occupy city council chambers, and then they expanded it to the neighborhood councils, and they expanded it to build a coalition with ACE and other grassroots organizations. But really driving it was about between 3 and 8 people at any given time. No resources, no funding, just grit, and just innovating and learning as they went along.
So I want to reiterate. So you're talking about 3 to 8 people were able to be at the central core of something that was able to actually
against Wells Fargo straight up. Their lobbyists versus this sort of it's like the Bad News Bears versus the New York Yankees, and the Bad News Bears win. It's crazy, but that's important because it happened, and it's not the only example.
So, can you give us another example? These kind of David versus Goliath kind of things. Because I think you're right. We need to normalize the idea that people sitting around really trying to think about something and devoting a certain amount of hours. We think of these corporations as so undefeatable or so monolithic. I know that I run a small press called El Martillo Press. And I met with some independent publishers. And I was like, well, we need to figure this out. Like, well, the corporate, the big five, this, the big five, that. But the reality, what do they have? They have an office full of people who make phone calls.
Yeah.
We can make phone calls. The idea that that the corporations, yes, they have legal teams and this and that and the other, and the power of the states often will show up at their command. They do have those things, but the reality is they don't have magical powers. And I think that we sometimes feel that way, that we can't do the things they can, and we very much can. Some of these things, we very much can do these things.
We've been conditioned.
Hours.
Yeah. So there's a concept by Antonio Gramsci called cultural hegemony. It's a concept I reference in the book, which is how the ruling class uses various strategies in storytelling and propaganda to give us the idea that they're divinely appointed to rule our society. Essentially, it's called. Can we maybe not have so many billionaire superheroes? Look at Batman. You know what I mean? If Bruce Wayne just paid his taxes, he would make himself irrelevant. Because but yeah. So another example, I think one of the crux examples of the book is a group called the People for Bernie Sanders. And this is not known. Most people think Occupy failed, Bernie Sanders came out of the free market because he appealed to unrealistic millennials, and it's just not true. Bernie didn't want to run, okay? He did not want to run. So there were two groups, and ironically, the leaders of those two groups came out of Dennis Kucinich's campaign in 2004, which was really the first sort of like insurgent peace campaign. Like Dennis Kucinich, if you remember, was the peace candidate, which is wild in a post 9/11 world, which has all but killed the movement. So you have two groups. One was called, out of that was born Progressive Democrats of America, and which still exists today, and they do good work. And then you also have another group called the People for Bernie Sanders, which is a group of Occupy Wall Street activists who saw the Clinton campaign was an extension of the same neoliberal policies, that had waged war and really like decimated the middle class and the poor, and really they thought that there needed to be an answer to this. And so they tried to recruit Elizabeth Warren. She declined because Elizabeth Warren had also been a sort of a champion of Occupy Wall Street. And they launched a campaign called the 99 Events for the 99%. This is well before, Senator Sanders actually, made the announcement. He didn't want to run, but then he saw these groups following him across the country going, "Run, Bernie, run." And then this Occupy network got activated, and this became the movement ahead of him. So a lot of those groups, Iowa for Bernie, Black Men for Bernie, a lot of these affinity groups, these small decentralized groups, came out of that, and they launched there was an open letter of Occupy activists saying that this is something that we hope all of the occupiers will support. Now you have to understand that this was a group of about six people who, with zero resources. Charles Lenchner was sort of like the spearhead, and then you have some amazing Brett Banditelli, Kat Bresler, amazing people. They beat the Clinton campaign on social media. There's a platform called People for Bernie on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. They beat the Clinton campaign with their infinite resources. This is the most well-funded primary campaign in history up to that point. Every single day of the primary, they got more eyeballs and traction than the Clinton campaign, straight up. So this is really important because Bernie didn't want to run. He was a tactic, and just imagine the world that we would have lived in if that didn't happen. Because Bernie became the Bernie campaign. It's really important in this book that I differentiate between the campaign and the movement. They're different. They're different things. And it's really important to understand that Bernie's platform became a lightning rod to unite all of these movements for justice, labor unions, healthcare for all, factions of the anti-war movement, the environmental movement, the anti-fracking movement. Anti-fracking, that's also another movement started by a relatively small group of people. They should have never won, and that they did. They won a ban on fracking in New York State. And I think actually there's a moratorium coming in California pretty soon too. So keep your eye out for that.
Oh, so it's very interesting to hear you talk about this because from someone just outside, just kind of observing, I did notice. I mean, it was very notable to me. I mean, I just made the assumption, or I don't know, made the assumption, but the analysis that the reason why Bernie Sanders had been so much more successful than say Dennis Kucinich or Cynthia McKinney or many of these people in the past that have kind of like run as some as a peace candidate, as a protest candidate, as a working class candidate, or I speak for the candidate, that all kind of the Mike Gravel, all these people that had run in the past that had raised these good points and people kind of like and then did nothing. The reason why Bernie was actually so successful was because of the Occupy movement. But I had no idea that it was Occupy itself that had pressured him to run. See, I think that's from an outside observer, seeing the fact that Occupy was the factor that promoted Bernie Sanders to a level that never was possible in the past. I think that was readily observable. But to actually know that history, It's why everyone out here has got to buy the book.
It's wild. Awesome. So we'd love to open it up for any questions. Yeah.
I was wondering why you're not talking about Marianne Williamson. She's talking about everything you're talking about.
Well, Marianne is in the book. She's a friend. I've known Marianne for a long time. There's a bunch of stories in the book about. I mean, this book covers so much. I can't cover everything. But yeah, so there's an excerpt in the book where Marianne caught a lot of flack, but legitimately she was the only candidate in history to actually shift the Overton window on reparations. She was actually the only candidate to talk on the national platform about reparations. That deserves it deserves praise. So Marianne has always I think she's a brilliant speaker, and she's a friend. She's always showed up to support progressive candidates. So it's just, there's a lot of, it's sort of like, you could go on and on for like the things that I'm not talking about. There's,
But she's actually running now.
Yes.
And she's having the same problem that she's not getting covered by any media.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's a duopoly, and this is a much bigger. It would take a long time to kind of unpack that. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
What happened to the Bernie Sanders campaign? They had such momentum, and all of a sudden he dropped out.
That's a great question. And if only there was a book that tells you exactly what happened from the inside. Yeah, exactly. It is a tell-all. So, I'm trying not to make anyone, I don't want to set the idea that it's anyone's fault, but I do believe that it is an important autopsy, that we need to have an accounting of the 2016 and 2020 campaign, because Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign was the first campaign in history to win all three of the first contests in the primary. The first one, we came really, really, really close. And you can imagine the world we would live in if we had such an ally. And I have no doubt that Bernie would have also disappointed us, because the system is so corrupt. And if you're looking for a perfect leader, it will not exist. It does not exist. But I can say there's a combination of external factors, but in both cases, there were people like Neera Tanden, and we'll use 2020 as an example. In 2020, they knew that Bernie was going to be the presumptive front runner in 2020. This was terrifying. Okay, Bernie had smashed. Remember, before 2016, what was every single election about? Oh, who raised the most money? Every single time, whoever raised the most money was the presumptive front runner. All of a sudden, Bernie smashes every single campaign fundraising record with small dollar donations between $18 and $27. Okay, while the other candidates are doing $30,000 fundraisers, which we, showed up and made some fun. We did a couple of direct actions that were fun. There's a story in the book of how we threw $1,000 in the air when the Clinton campaign motorcade came through, and it was like, But the point is all of a sudden we don't hear that anymore. That's weird, super weird. And so the what you might call the Democratic establishment. You had the candidates, Pete Buttigieg meeting with Center for American Progress, Clinton surrogates like Neera Tanden, getting together in San Francisco, having parties with the wealthy donors to strategize, what are we going to do about this? Because the barbarians are at the gate. And so they, on the eve of Super Tuesday, which we just had, we had one of the most, like Bernie it was like a freight train. The momentum was insane, and right on the eve of I do believe there are some internal things happen within the campaign that I talk about in the book. I'm not going to talk about it now. You can read the book if you want to hear some of that story. But essentially, what happened is President Obama was able to convince the key candidates to drop out on the eve of Super Tuesday, and once they dropped out, that really opened the lane for Joe Biden to then come in. And it was an incredible political calculation that I think the campaign and the Sanders movement was completely unprepared for. And I do talk about some of the theory of change I think that we should learn from. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Any questions for Matt? Because, you know, you got a great opportunity with Matt as well.
Either of you, the Antifa movement and all the rioting in the streets, do you see that as a positive thing, or?
What do you mean by what do you mean by Antifa rioting? Because Antifa doesn't riot.
Well, they dropped a pallet of bricks
So that
for them to throw through all the stores.
yeah. Do you have? There's zero evidence that is but by any, and also there's no Antifa organization. So you understand, like, Antifa is a tactic. It's not an organization. So you want to talk about that?
I mean, there's a counterfactual, right? There's a counter history, right? Counter history where that doesn't happen, right?
Yes.
And you know, you have 500 fascists marching in Charlottesville. You have something like 900 hate crimes in the 3 days after Trump is elected. You have all kinds of horrific things happening. I mean, I almost got into 3 or 4 fights a few days after Trump was elected, living in Riverside. And people just looking at me like, and I, you know, I was helping raise a kid at the time, so I was there with this little kid, and you know. All of
I'm
a sudden-
sorry, why'd you get into fights?
Because people looked at me like they wanted to fight.
For what reason?
Because I'm Mexican.
Oh.
You think that people wanted to fight you because you were Mexican?
Yeah, in Riverside. Yeah,
In
it was,
California?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
The amount of
There's
rape.
more Mexicans in California than white
yeah.
people.
That's why I was gonna.
So
Okay, wait.
yeah,
You've been in Moreno Valley?
I live in Riverside.
You live in Riverside? Okay.
Yeah, so it also, I think it's important to take a step back and think about if you're not a person of color, you got to try to look through their eyes and understand that our experience as white people is different. We have a different experience. So, like, you may not see the things that they experience, but I think it's important that we sort of like create some space to dialogue and just consider that maybe, you know, Matt, I know Matt is a very truthful person, so I believe you.
Well, I mean, this was the environment. I mean, I got tons of death threats around the time.
Were you doing
yeah.
anything?
Was I throwing anything? No, I wasn't throwing anything.
Were you doing
Yeah, and also if we can, we're here to try to talk about ideas.
No, it's fine, it's fine. No, I was getting death threats because of the things I was saying.
Okay.
And the things I was saying were basically, you know, that Trump's a fascist and everyone supports him's a fascist, and you're all fascists, and so I would get death threats.
Define fascism.
Define fascism. Okay. So I was using fascism pretty like loosely, right? But if you wanted to define fascism like the Mussolini way, it would be the merger of state and corporation, right? Which is what, correct? Okay, this is.
So I can.
All right. So okay. So. Who was talking about bringing back Operation Wetback and talking about keeping, which was a program in the 1950s run by President Eisenhower, right? Now, my family was deported in the 1930s under the Mexican Repatriation Act, despite the fact that my grandfather was born in Denver. So when I hear things like that, I get pretty upset. I get pretty angry. I get pretty confrontational. And so this confrontation, my attitude was met with other people who had an attitude that, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe California was being lost because there are too many Mexicans in California. People with that attitude, right? Who I encountered many of, living in Riverside, or living in Moreno Valley at the time.
Do you think it's the issue of being Mexicans, or you're dealing, I'm not saying this about you, you're dealing with poorer people of a larger amount, a lot of people who, especially in San Francisco, picked up and left the state because they're not conducive to, my uncle was the head of the AFL-CIO in the state from 64 to 76. His name was Sigmund Erowitz. I met Brown, and I met, I forget the guy, the head of the farm workers union when I was a kid.
Cesar Chavez?
Cesar Chavez. Anyways, my uncle would not be a Democrat today. He'd be done. Because the Democrats have gone so off the rails, especially in terms of their association with Big Pharma and now defense,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera.
So,
et cetera.
question, is there a question coming?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of this that we talk about, everybody talks about is racial. it's more tribal, it's more territorial. That's why certain people will go in specific neighborhoods to live around.
No, thank you, but is there a question? Do you have a question?
Well, no, it's not, the issue here is that the framing of every issue as being a racial issue.
Well, no,
It's
just
missing the
to,
boat
if
by
you,
a
if,
mile.
I'm sorry, just in terms of
Right,
process.
right.
if
So,
you have a
so
question-
you had a candidate.
Well, I have a question. 'Cause
Yeah, sure.
I think what he's trying to say is that the movement the power that you made out of Occupy and harnessed and put into Bernie Sanders got split up by a race. All these racial ideas that we had already seemed to move on from the Seinfeld and Frasier generation, where we should have united together, we were actually torn apart. So can you go into, like, do you think that it's helped more since now that everybody's become so I mean, here we are, we all have very similar political leanings, I would imagine, from here to CJ. But like that you see that even now, this like little bit of racial infighting is kind of tearing apart where we should be more united.
Take it. So
Well, I mean, okay, I said that somebody was antagonistic towards me because I walked somewhere and they don't want me there, and you told me that didn't happen. So you like, and then you're blaming me. So I mean
Didn't you
that's
say
kind of
because-
wild. I mean
didn't
that's
you
really
say
wild.
Because you were Mexican.
I did say that.
You said they were fascists. That's what you said.
Okay, so
Yeah.
well,
And I did
let's
say that.
rewind it.
And I stand by that. I mean, I okay. Do I think it's that they are hate crime enthusiasts? I will call them racists. I will call them hate mongers. I mean, does that make you feel better that I say it that way?
You said they.
Dude, we say rather than say fascist,
Look,
because you want to, you want to have a very narrow definition of
that
you
was
want
an intense
you have a
time.
want a
That was an
narrow.
intense-
Hey, sorry, just, I'm gonna put my
Right,
foot
so-
down here.
so-
Wait, hold on, stop. Everyone, let's take a deep breath. Literally take a deep breath. I'm not even kidding. And so what we're here to do, Matt's come a long way. If you have a question, we're gonna ask a question, and then we're gonna give Matt and myself a chance to respond. What we're not gonna do here is, we can have a debate outside of it. That's not the forum that we're doing right now. No, I'm sorry, sir.
Why didn't Bernie
Yeah.
Sanders fight in 2016? He didn't fight for shit. After he ran, he didn't fight
Yes.
against Clinton's which would have been much greater for the movement we're talking about here.
Okay.
If he had actually
I'm
made the
gonna
sacrifice.
come back to that, but I want to give Matt a chance to talk. So if you have a question, we're gonna ask a question, and then we'll give the panelists a chance to respond, because that's gonna be the comment. So go,
Yeah,
Matt.
yeah. I mean, okay, so I just feel like you had a candidate who said Mexico is sending drug dealers and rapists. You had a candidate who said this Mexican judge not fit to judge me because he's Mexican. He brought up Operation Wetback. He talked about building a wall on the Mexican border, and he said that Mexico will pay for it. You had a very, very explicitly anti-Mexican campaign. And when I tell you that people had animus towards Mexicans in that time period, you don't believe me. So that to me, that's just wild. That's just wild. It's just wild. So, I don't know if we can finish that conversation. As far as Bernie Sanders, why he didn't fight, I mean, what would make you think he would fight? This guy is caucused with the Democrats his entire political career. Occupy, I think Occupy pushed him to become something, a cultural lightning rod that he would not have been otherwise. But otherwise, he is Dennis Kucinich. Otherwise, he is.
He'd be a centrist in Europe. In Europe, he would be.
Sure,
considered a
absolutely.
centrist,
But he would be like a Dennis Kucinich figure. He would be like Gary Hart. He would be like all these figures from all these different past. Was like a protest candidate who's on stage, and everyone says like, "Man, I wish someone like that could be president," and then not vote for them, right?
Dennis Kucinich was from Cleveland.
So sorry,
Bernie
sir,
Sanders
sir.
lived in Lily White,
Sorry,
Vermont.
sir.
Come on.
I'm going to ask you really respectfully and nicely if we can keep it in the form of, we're going to give a chance for other people to have questions. We're not going to have a debate now. That's not the forum that we're doing here. I'm going to respectfully ask. But I will say that to answer your question, there is an inside track that tells all about what happened behind the scenes in 2016 with the Bernie Sanders campaign. So I don't want to just make it a ploy to buy the book, but it actually does tell you from an inside up right up to the campaign manager who was meeting with the Clinton campaign manager. They were having craft beers in Burlington, while he had promised us a floor fight. So it does address that very specifics, but I'm just going to request respectfully, if it's possible, because Matt thank you. So, but we can talk about it after if you want to dialogue, not the format here. You have a question?
How significant is the role of the arts, film, theater, music, poetry in organizing a social movement?
Absolutely crucial. Matt?
Oh man, I wish poetry was more as important as the other fields you mentioned, or at least as well recognized. I think that people live and die for art. I mean, people. If you think about what people like really, I mean, even when you think about great orator, that's art, right? So someone's great speech, that's art. I mean, people will they fight over the conditions that they experience, right? But what gives them that extra fire in the belly? What gives them that extra oomph to actually go out and do something they would not have done? It is a great speech. It is a song, an anthem. It is a film. It is a book. It is a passage of, not typically not an entire poem, but a passage of poetry. It is those things that people that motivate people to move beyond. And so I think that what's really important though is that sometimes when we give rhetoric, we overemphasize the role of art, like I say, and it's really the artists who lead. That's not necessarily true. I mean, the reality is that people who organize things, people who do things, people who actually do the grassroots organizing, that's where people who actually get the chairs there, who make sure the speakers are on time, people who like get to make sure the plane ticket. I mean, that's all really actually that's the central part. But people talk about the arts like they're like this big thing, but then when it's time for a rally, what's the first thing that gets time cut? What's the first thing to get well, this organizer, he said 10 minutes, but he's talking for 20 minutes. We're cutting out the band. We're cutting out this. So I think that art is extremely important. It's what galvanizes people. It's what makes people do things they would not do. But so is obviously organizing, and so is expertise. So is the people who come in and say the thing that you did not know, that you walked away from the thing that I'm learning, right? So the expert's really important, the organizer's really important, and the artist's really important, and they all need to respect each other. That's not currently the way organizing's done these days.
It's true. This is an amazing question. In the book, there is a chapter called Bernie's Avengers. And one of the main role that I had with the official campaign was I was one of the Sanders campaign's surrogate wranglers, which means the actors and the bands that opened up for Bernie and stumped for him. I had created a team to recruit them and organize them. And we were not official campaign. I actually intentionally kept this not official campaign so that we could do things like we created Bernie's Diner, which is on Fairfax and Wilshire. We converted that famous diner into, which stands today, it's covered with psychedelic Bernie murals. We could organize direct actions and give the campaign insulation to. Okay, but in terms of the role of artists, think about artist, art can transcend all of this political bullshit. Okay, all of the silos, all of the the tribalism. Art can transcend that, because you may not like Roger Waters, what he has to say about Gaza, but fucking A, do you like a Pink Floyd song? We feel we have a relationship with them. They were the soundtrack of our lives. The films have been such an important part of our lives. And also think about in this climate, in this capitalist climate, what it means for them to put their brand behind somebody, okay? When you have all of these managers and agents saying, no, don't do it, don't take a stand. In the 60s, the artists really drove the movement, the anti-war and civil rights movement. It was really driven by the art so much. And then you have, with the emergence of the managers and agents and the whole class of people who have, insulated artists from becoming political, is because they don't want to piss anyone off, because they don't want to hurt the brand. Okay, so think about what it means when Killer Mike comes out for Bernie Sanders and has a talk with him in a barbershop. Think about what it means when Mark Ruffalo comes out, Shailene Woodley, Kendrick Sampson, Susan Sarandon. When these people come out and stand up and say, we're going to put our careers on the line for this movement because it's that important. Okay, really important. And I also want to say that the group that we organized, these people also weren't just, you understand, like we talked every day. We had a secret thread that we talked every day. We put our bodies on the line. And then when the convention was over, and the convention itself, there's stories about the convention itself, which was like not quite. Steve was at the '68 Chicago convention, not quite like cracking heads like that, but shit was on fire for sure. But after the convention, this group of Sanders surrogates, we were brought into the Standing Rock movement very early on by Shailene Woodley, who had been involved. And I would suggest, of course, I don't want to take, obviously you can't take away from the 500 tribes that united for that fight. And I will say in terms of the media footprint and the popular support, you cannot overlook the impact that these leaders had, these influencers had, with their millions of social media followers, and their ability to get people to care about things that they don't. For me, I am a poor person. I've always been a poor person. I don't know how to get people to care about showing up to a protest for something important, other than when it's not rocket science, but when Jane Fonda shows up, people show up, the cameras show up, okay? So for me, it's a tactic, but I think it is so important. And those Sanders was playing to 20,000, 30,000 arenas, okay, where you had 100 people at a Clinton rally. It was like you had lines. It was like a Rolling Stones concert. They were selling merch. And the last point I want to say is, what is really important is I don't want to drive the narrative that the technocracy, the famous people were the real power behind the campaign was the 99%, okay? It was a punk rock movement, all right? And it was ordinary people making media. It was average people making t-shirts, making art, because everybody believed that it was ours and it was up to us. That's the power. So the artists, super early, but the power of the 99% to create their own art, to create, like we knew, just like the punk rock, the reason that I sort of did a riff on the Ramones logo is because the Bernie Sanders movement, Occupy Wall Street movements were punk rock movements. The punk rock movements of the 1970s knew that there was no record label coming to save them. They knew that they needed to produce their own records, make their own shows, make their own zines. If they wanted to it was up to them. And it's the same with Occupy and Bernie Sanders. If we were gonna get through, to break through the noise, to get people to understand, we knew it was up to us, and every single person felt that it was up to me, and that also that it was mine. We weren't looking for some other leader to lead the way. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a phenomenal question. I think maybe we have time for one more.
No, I was waving at my wife.
Okay, great. Yes. And please speak up.
I'm curious, given how powerful art is in so many different European political expressions over the years, like the quality of the art, post-art in particular. Any thoughts you have as to why we don't have that here, and what we might do to encourage that?
Yeah, just one more time, take it just so I can understand what the question is.
In Europe,
yes,
specifically around communism, there has been incredibly powerful art, for instance, against communism. Right? There's a plethora of posters, incredible artists that in America we probably haven't heard of. But the art, you take one look at it, and the imagery just hits your heart. It transcends all things. And I'm curious what thoughts you have about why here in America we don't have that, and perhaps we haven't looked to have it.
Matt, you want to take that one?
So you're talking about like posters, like specifically like posters?
Like agitprop art.
Agitprop?
Yeah.
I mean, there's Shepard Fairey, and then he had a what do you call it? A protege, Ernesto Urena, who did a lot of those like known as legal, and those were pretty popular. But no, you're right. They never reached the level that you're talking. I mean, Shepard Fairey with the Obama thing. But I mean, the art in service of what, right? With the hope and change posters he had. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there really isn't in this time. But like I don't know who's doing that in Europe at the moment either. I mean, maybe Banksy, I guess, maybe would be like the closest right now. So
I could show you some stuff if you're interested, and that might.
well,
pique
but how
your
popular
interest.
is it though? Like in Europe, like how? I mean, maybe it's great. I mean,
Well, I can
people are
tell
always
you-
making like great art all the time. But
Yeah, I can tell you at the time,
Yeah.
as part of the resistance movements, it had tremendous effect on the people in those movements. So
Yeah,
I'd be
You're
happy to
talking like in the what time period is this?
Pick any communist resistance, and there have been many of them, right? Hungary, Poland, Russia, on and on and on. But I'd be happy to chat with you later about it.
Sure. But yeah, actually, yeah, no, but Europe is different. I mean, each country is different. I mean, I'm actually about to go read in Italy, Netherlands, Hungary, and Serbia. So I'm really there. This might be my 4th trip to Italy in the last 2.5 years, and I can say that it's very fascinating to be out there because the art, the way they treat artists is so different. I was covered by like the national press. Like the second I got there, it was really quite different than America. But also, the country's so different because right now Italy is experiencing the most right wing. They say the most right wing government they've had since Mussolini, and yet. When I was there, I stayed in this place, this barracks, this anarchist-held barracks that they had taken for many, many years. It's called ex-externers land. It's like ex-military barracks, and it's in Bari. And I said, like, where are you getting the water? Where are you getting the electricity? How are you doing this? And they said, the government would never cut us off. That'd be inhumane. So even Italy, in this right-wing turn, is way to the left of everyday, normal, well-functioning United States of America.
Yeah, it's interesting, but you have to understand, like, neo-fascism, and we're going to circle all the way back around to previous conversation. So technically, it's neo-fascism, okay? So technically it's neo-fascism, but fascism classically, if you go to the classical distinction, is a right-wing movement, is ultra-nationalistic, it is xenophobic, and it tends to scapegoat the other for political power. You look it up. You look it up.
I've read Seldy's book. I don't know what you're talking about.
You can Google fascism right now, and that's what you're going to say.
I've read George Seldy's books on it, and he's probably the expert on fascism. Now, they may have.
Okay, sir, you had mentioned that you were going to respect the format, but I'm just.
You're throwing it at me. You're looking at me, and you're making.
Oh,
a statement in response.
Okay, I hear that you feel that I was starting a conversand.
Well, you're looking at me. So.
Okay, great. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Fair enough. Fair point. And I'm just also trying to circle back to make it to everybody and making eye contact. But yeah, so that is you can go you all can look it up for yourself what fascism is. But
I mean, it's a very debated word.
Yeah.
We're
talking about neo-fascism. Neo-fascism does have distinctions. But in terms of the agitprop, I think there are some wonderful artists in LA. Specifically, we have other artists like David Solnit, who goes all the way back to the the WTO Battle of Seattle in 1999. So I do think if you look even just at the Bernie Sanders campaign, just Google the art of the political revolution, that we had art shows where you have amazing artists. I mean, really incredible artists coming out to make posters and all sorts of art for that particular campaign. Standing Rock had amazing art. Oh my God, it was beautiful. So I believe you're right, but I think we also can't overlook the fact that there's been a consolidation of power, and the corporatization of America is really specifically not. And it's actually amazing we're having this conversation where we are right now. It's actually really cool. It's super cool. It's really super cool that this is happening right now. It's wild. But really, to keep the money flowing, generally speaking, we want to sort of maintain a status quo, even if the status quo is killing us, even if 60,000 people are uninsured or underinsured or dying. 60,000 people every year die because we are uninsured and underinsured. Okay, so there is, corporations basically don't want to alienate any audience, and they want to sort of keep a status quo. So we don't disrupt that. So, yeah, maybe one more question? Matt, do you want to respond to that? Or you go?
I think it might be a wrap-up question.
Sure, great.
With as much, and I'm kind of following off the media and the idea of confirmation bias and how confirmation bias has essentially made America a debate society instead of a discussion society. And the thing that I always found remarkable about Standing Rock, Bernie Sanders movement, it was an alternate discussion that we haven't seen since then. And this room, in just the last 30 minutes since I got here, is pretty much a kind of a complexion of that. Of how do we get back to being able to have conversations when we're not fighting over labels?
Right. That's a great question. I would actually like to read sort of the, it was okay. Can we just get one more round of applause for Matt Cedillo coming out all the way from Tennessee and for offering his poetry. I'm so grateful that you came out. I really love this conversation. Just like I have so much respect for you as an artist and who you are. And man, like you see him, he's ubiquitous. He's I look, 1 minute you're in Italy, then you're in Mexico, and then you're traveling all over the world. But the reason I call this book "Be the Revolution" is because we've become so entrenched in externalities, we forget how we're being with each other, and I think it starts with a basic respect and a humility. I think there's a chapter in this book on how QAnon was organized, really important, because the tech platforms have, those tech platforms have actually corralled us into echo chambers. And those echo chambers have become more entrenched, but they do this so that we are easy to advertise to, okay? And we see with QAnon, actually played a huge role in radicalizing people behind what was essentially a right-wing psyop. It was a fake psyop that was engineered, and I knew some of the people involved in that. And there's I think the QAnon chapter is really important because it speaks directly to that. And we have been corralled into these echo chambers, and also I talked about atomization earlier. Because we've also become an individualistic society, there's something called online disinhibition effect, which means that because I'm not looking at you, because I look at, like if this conversation was happening on Twitter or Facebook, right? It could go on endlessly and we would reach no conclusion. But here, if I'm looking in your eyes, then I have to realize that there's a person there, I have to realize that there's another human, and even if we don't agree, maybe I have pause to take a step back and at least give you the dignity of your point of view. But at the same time, I'm going to also make requests that you respect ours as well, And so I think what it comes down to is a need to be right. We are dying from, there's children around, we are dying from terminal rightness. It is terminal rightness. Everyone is trying to be right about their little square they're standing on ideologically, okay? Instead of stepping back and saying, well, okay, well, where can we agree? Can we talk about it? And there are I do point some really direct factors where there have been conscious misinformation campaigns waged by people like the Koch brothers, and there is documented. We've seen it happen. They've waged war on objective climate. QAnon rose out of the swamp of that Koch brothers funded dark money misinformation campaign to cast doubt on legitimate climate science because it.
I have one question regarding.
Sure, I'll put a pin in it, please. I'm going somewhere. But I just wanted to sort of end off. I want to just sort of end off on reading a little bit like this last excerpt, but ultimately it's about our beingness. And I think if we can get out from behind the keyboard, my goal with this book is to get everybody out from behind the keyboard and in real life to meet with real people again. And this is where it happens. This is where we can talk through it. I also think there's a bigger conversation to unpack with some of the other isms, whether it's classism, patriarchy, white supremacy, colonialism. These are all things that we have been in the drinking water from birth. They live under the level of consciousness and run us. And I do think we need to have a process where we can talk about it not in a shame-based way, but where we can unpack the fact that this is just what we grew up with. We were conditioned to think this way, and the ruling class uses this to their advantage constantly, has used this to divide us, continue to divide and divide us. And even the Democratic establishment uses identity politics to divide as well, and not in a way that is that's productive or actually, really going to benefit those communities. But I'll start with this. Accept that the life of fighting for justice will break your heart. It will break it over and over again. It will leave you wanting to crawl into a little whimpering ball in the shower at times. Let it. Your heart will heal stronger in the broken places if you do the work. There is no birth without pain. There is no magic without sacrifice. This will give you the medicine that you will carry to heal others. It will help you build resilience. Learn everything you can. Seek out mentors who are older, wiser, and more successful. But don't be afraid to learn what young people can teach you about the changing world and the fresh perspectives they offer. Be patient with them, their views, if their views lack perspective and the wisdom that comes with the age of experience. The work will often be thankless. In victory, you'll give your team all the credit. In defeat, you'll take the blame. People will even blame you for things you never did. You will get past it. A pure heart is the best defense, and eventually, if you are consistently a person of character and integrity, those minor character assassinations won't matter in the long run. Don't be, children, earmuffs, don't be an asshole. Honor people's time, especially when they give it freely. Honor them for their contribution. Do this publicly. Make sure you tell them directly and make sure it lands with sincerity. Strive for excellence, but don't let the idea of perfection be the enemy of the good enough. Realize the complexity of the problems, but don't let your focus be held captive by them. Don't give in to anger and despair. Above all, don't let your actions be guided by let your actions be guided by an incomparable love for all humanity. Thank you. And I'll just end. Sorry, I'll close with this. Should I keep going, or should we wrap it up?
That's
Yeah. Okay. Forgive everyone, especially yourself. It is said that holding on to bitterness and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. This does not mean to accept or condone evil. The greatest alchemy is to transform this anger into loving, courageous, conscious, strategic action. Anger is a fire that burns out quickly. Stay committed to the footwork, but surrender the results. At the end of the day, it is about the hearts we touch and the lives we positively impact. As Bell Hooks once said, the transformative power of love is the foundation of all meaningful social change. When all else has fallen away, love sustains. Envision the world as you wish it to be. Make big calls to action for sweeping change. Paint a picture people can see in their minds. Passionately enroll emissaries that carry your message. One thing that we definitely got wrong during Occupy was when we said there are no leaders of this movement. We should have said everyone is a leader of this movement. Remember that no one is coming to save you. If you are looking for a savior, look in the mirror. Who knows, maybe you could be the next Bernie Sanders. Find like-minded people who align with your values. Start an outlandish and foolhardy quest to make a difference. Fail. Learn from your failures. Take away the victories, no matter how small. Build victory gardens. Play to win, but hold fast to the moments you share with those who stand with you and for something greater than themselves. Cherish those who honor you. Stand by you and are willing to tell you the truth even when there's something you don't want to hear. Choose your allies wisely. Admit your mistakes and shortcomings. There is no problem that cannot be solved through committed souls working together with love, wisdom, and vision. As the old adage says, we do not inherit this earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Despite the ugliness, the divisiveness, the fascism, the war, the racism, the inequality, there is still so much beauty in this world that the generations who follow deserve to have a chance to build an inhabitable, livable planet. The climate apocalypse is now. It is as Tennessee Williams once said, we live in a house that is on fire, no fire department to call, no way out, just the upstairs window to look out of while the fire burns the house down with us trapped in it. Only a people's movement to overcome the regressive systems, placing greed and power over life will save us. You are that movement. So if you are looking for someone to save you, look within. In her novel, The Dispossessed, Ursula Le Guin said, we have nothing but our freedom. We have nothing to give. We have nothing to give you but your own freedom. We have no states, no nations, no presidents, no premiers, no generals, no bosses, no bankers, no landlords, no wages, no charity, no police, no soldiers, no wars. No, do we have much else. You cannot take what you have not given, and you must give yourself. You cannot buy the revolution. You cannot make the revolution. You can only be the revolution. It is in your spirit, or it is nowhere. The time to do all of this, to make a stand, is now. And always remember, all things are possible. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, man.
Yeah, buy Jay's book. Highlight the parts you agree with. Highlight the parts you disagree with. Hit him up. He's always open to conversation.
Yeah, and happy to continue to talk. But thank you.
Here, over here.
Thank you, everyone, for coming so much. And yeah, if you want a copy, I'm actually not sure how this part. Rachel, how does this part work? Oh, they've already bought the book, or can they get it here? Oh, okay, great. So there's plenty of copies up front. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your patience.
That's me. Yeah.
You know, something you said struck me. I wanted to tell me about how I did old books. I think it was in the 1700s.
Yeah. What's your name?
Opening it.
You go. I'm Jay.
It's like in a week or so. Good fine arts theater in Beverly Hills.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah, to me, what you said.
Let me just stop this.
You know about the Zeitgeist movie?
How do I end this?
They're coming out with the fourth one. It's going to be at the Fine Arts Theater.
Okay.
Jay and I.
Do you know how to end these? I've never done a live stream. How do I end this?
Should be a stop button.
I want to
sell this.
I don't want it to like.
Do you know who David
It should be.
Land Jr. is? He's really famous for making opal jewelry. So I designed this. He made a Star of David.
I'm nervous
with
to exit because I don't want to lose the whole thing.
We won't. No,
This
you exit.
mantra, Om Namah Shivaya.
Okay.